video, we're going to talk about what it means to have a communications plan. There are so many other times when you'll need to have your communications materials ready for various audiences and purposes, other than when you're pitching. So what are these communications materials, and what are these purposes? It might help to think about the different stakeholders that you need to communicate with, and why you're trying to communicate with each one. I like to organize a communications plan by asking and answering these 5 questions. Who? Who are the stakeholders you need to communicate with? Why? What are the actions you want them to take? Why are you communicating with them? What? What is your messaging? What is the content you will use to inform their action? How? Channels to convey the messaging and content. How are you getting your message across to them? And when? What is the timing and organization of your delivery? So let's talk through these one at a time, and we'll start with the who and the why. I usually work on the who and the why together. I make a table like this one where I basically list all the stakeholders and the desired actions, and then I brainstorm examples of communications tools. So for example, a key stakeholder is my end user or customer. So that's my who. And my why in terms of the desired action is that I want them to adopt my solution. I want them to provide feedback. So I want this to be a two-way communications. I want to engage them, right? And the different ways I can reach them, we'll talk about later. And then there's the economic buyer. If this is different from the end user and customer, I want them to pay for my solution. So I'm going to have to convey that value proposition to them. Then there's internal communications. So my team are key stakeholders, right? My desired actions for them are implementing, innovating, and improving my solution. And then my board. I need them to help me assess progress, ensure organizational health, and strategize for the future. So these are some external and internal stakeholders. And then don't forget about funders. I want them to invest in my solution. Partners and collaborators are other examples of the who. And then the why would be, to help implement and grow my solutions. And you can think broadly to a general audience. For example, policymakers. You might want them to draft, enact, enforce laws and regulations to tackle root causes related to your challenge and help you go from that direct action to the systems change and framework change. And the general public, it might be part of your mission to raise awareness and participate in advocacy. And then for each one, there are examples of communication tools that we'll talk about. So by thinking through your different stakeholders and why you need to communicate with them, you can create a goal-oriented communications plan. That way, you can step back and evaluate your plan to see if it's having the effect you wanted, because you might end up investing a lot of time in communications. So we started with the who and the why, and the next is the what. What are you going to say to them? Messaging is really important, crafting your messages to various audiences. So when thinking about your messaging, think about what action you want them to take, the why, right? Think about what's in it for them, what are their characteristics, and what is missing. What can you provide that will help them take that action? So it's important to know your audience, know your stakeholders, and know what action you want to take so that you can figure out what information you need to provide in order for them to take that action. What incentivizes them, what motivates them, just like you got to know your customers a few modules back. So in the marketing world, they use the stakeholder ladder to think about how you can move different stakeholders and engage with them as you grow a relationship with them, right? So it kind of breaks down the purpose of the messaging into baby steps, because the messaging should be crafted differently when you're trying to attract someone to your venture and then when you're trying to get them engaged with it. So the different rungs of the ladders represent the different stages that your stakeholders might be at. So they might start off as just curious, interested, maybe suspicious. And the goal then is to attract them. What messaging can you use to attract them? So then once you attract them and hook them, they might become prospectively engaged. So then you want to provide more information. At that stage, your messaging should focus on providing more information. Then they might become testing, like testing you out. So then you need to convince them. And at that stage, your messaging will focus on convincing them. Then they'll engage. So that's when you have to keep them captivated. How do you keep them engaged? Until they really become advocates and evangelists of your solution. And to do that, you need to really inspire them. So you can craft your messaging differently at different stages to attract, inform, convince, captivate, and inspire your audience. It's really important to keep following up with them and have ongoing communications. So they're not going to move up this ladder with just one-time messaging. The goal is really to build a relationship with them, and you want to have this be two-directional. So another tool that helps, the stakeholder ladder is just a visualization, but a tool and template that you can use is this matrix that helps you do multidimensional messaging and thinking about your different stakeholders like the end users, economic buyers, team, board, policymakers, and general public, and then the different steps of messaging to attract, inform, convince, captivate, and inspire. So you can literally use this template, sit around with your team and other stakeholders, and think of what messages you'll use, what words you'll use to attract them, captivate them, inspire them, etc. So how do you want to craft that messaging? What words do you want to use? You want to provide information about the challenge, about your solution, and you want to tie it to their daily lives, right? Not just about a larger, less tangible social or environmental challenge, but how it affects them. And think about what they wake up worrying about or what they go to bed worrying about and how you can link with that and make it personal. So these are some tips in terms of crafting your messages. So now we've talked a little bit about the what in terms of how to do your messaging. So we've talked about the who, the why, and the what. So next, let's talk about the how of your communication strategy. How are you going to reach these people and convey these messages? So here we're talking about the communications channels through which you will disseminate these messages. There are so many that it can get overwhelming. That's why it's important to have your communications plan so that you have the opportunity to sit down and think about this with your team and know where you're going. Communications is not something that can be done ad hoc, and it's often something that social entrepreneurs just don't think about. Like, they're so busy doing the work, and then they feel like with whatever time they have left, they're going to do their messaging, and it doesn't work that way. So the first thing I want to say is, don't do this alone. Just like everything else in your journey, you need to do it in collaboration with others, and you need to hire someone to do your communications. If you can't pay anyone, it can be a volunteer, it can be one of your co-founders, but this is a specialized role, and there should be either a team member or a consultant or contractor doing this. Got it? Okay, so let's talk about some of those channels. First, social media. The purpose of using social media is to grow followers and likes, build awareness about your content, respond to positive and negative feedback, so you want to make it interactive. You want to strategically post content for various audiences to get them up that stakeholder ladder. It can also help you collect and synthesize real-time information and updates. You can share photos from your work and your collaborations so that it's a living, breathing communications channel. And it needs to be regularly updated and consistent. So again, this needs to be someone's job, because social media can also go very wrong. You can set people off in a way that you're not aiming to, and this can backfire. So use it in a very thoughtful, mindful, purposeful way. Other media are also super important, like your website. Your website should not read like a brochure. It needs to be interactive. For example, great ways to make it interactive are short videos about your work. You can post updates. I love to have a blog. And if your team doesn't have time to blog, you can have other stakeholders and partners and collaborators and end users post blogs. You can even have podcasts. I used to do that with the Alfanar website. And so your website also needs to be regularly updated, not as regular as social media. The purpose of social media is to have a conversation with people, but your website needs to contain all the information about what it is you do, who it is you are, what it is you're hoping to achieve, and what you've achieved so far, and how people can get involved. And then publications are a great communication channel. So it's good to carve out the time and the resources to share results. Having an annual report is sometimes like the bare minimum, but you can also create articles, whether by participating in peer-reviewed research or in more external-facing ways. You need to participate in thought leadership and share what you're struggling with, what you're discovering, and what you're testing. So you might not have time for this at the beginning, but you can also collaborate with others, with academics, writers, and fans to create publications. It's a really important communications channel. Then there's the good old-fashioned mailing lists. I prefer electronic. I really don't like getting paper mail. So mailing lists are a great way to just keep people updated. You don't want to use them too frequently. You want to focus on key messages. I would say like quarterly is ideal. And you need to know that most people won't read them. They're kind of more like a reminder. But for those who do read them, there should always be an objective. Is this newsletter about thanking people? Is it about asking them to do something, like donate or buy or whatever? Is it about updating? Is it about reflecting and sharing results? And you can do more than one of these in each newsletter, but when people read it and when you craft it, think about the objective. And then there's surveys and feedback forms. How can you get feedback from your users, from other stakeholders? This can be on your website. It can be through your mailing lists and social media. Or you can have surveys at strategic times to collect data from people. And you really want to craft these with people who understand the do's and don'ts of surveys. This is a specialized field. And so you want to try to find someone who has experience in building surveys and feedback forms to help you think about when and how to do this. Again, you can't do this alone. So the purpose of this module is to share with you what needs to go in your communications plan, but then you need to bring people to the table to help you craft and implement it. And the last part, I saved the best for last because it is the most important, is FaceTime. No. I'm not talking about FaceTiming someone on your iPhone. I mean actually spending time with people and getting to know them, like you've been doing since day one of your journey. This is a critical part of your communications plan. You need to make sure that you and your team members always have time for this, and that you never end up in a situation where you're so busy keeping your head down, getting product out, or getting word out, or being on social media, that you forget to actually spend time with people. You want to spend time with funders, with end users, with payers, with all your stakeholders, as you have been doing since the very beginning. So those are some of the different communications channels, whether they're digital or analog or in person. And finally, we come to the when. This is the most important part of your communications plan. The point of making a communications plan is to plan things out in advance so that you're not doing ad hoc communications. Like, oh, okay, today I have time to write something and I feel like it, so I'm going to write it. It's like, no, this needs to be in the calendar. We talked about process maps in the last module. You need a process map for your communications. What does it look like on the annual cycle? What are the key dates when you need to send out newsletters or social media content or email blasts, or to go meet with people on the ground and show up for them? This needs to be part of your work plan. It can't be an afterthought. So that's why we do a communications plan, is to think in advance about when each thing needs to happen. So to summarize, your communication plan speaks to who you're communicating with, why, what action you want them to take, what is going to be the words and the messages you're going to use, how What are the channels that you will disseminate these messages, and when? This is what you need to plan out in advance with your team, your stakeholders, and someone who's in charge of communications. And kabam, you have a communication plan. I'll end by saying, of course, the obvious, that there will be different strategies for different stakeholders, and that just like everything else you do, you need to evaluate your communications plan to see if it's working. That's why we want it to be goal-oriented, so that you can evaluate what's working and what's not. The next video is going to be about the do's and don'ts of communicating and pitching.